pivoting in life and reinvention is really hard.
Yeah.
Some people, these kind of serial entrepreneurs, have figured out a set of attributes that seem to be core tenets that they lean on no matter which career path and which direction they're actually going. And so I learned from that after failing multiple times after I decided to retire from the Olympic space. And so
Mm,
all of us have our self-perceived and I think understood identities associated with what we do and who we are. And those are
mhm.
somehow intrinsically tied. And so as someone who didn't care about anything outside of the Olympic realm for
Yeah.
15 years, I didn't know anything about what I was good at, what I was interested in, what I wanted to do next, and what my life purpose and or true north was.
Before we jump in, just a little context on this conversation. With the Winter Olympics starting off this week, the conversation that I had with Apolo Ohno felt like the perfect one to share. So we recorded it inside of one of our live classes, talking with authors who are in the midst of their books. And he's one of the most decorated Winter Olympians in US history. But what made this session so powerful wasn't just discussing the medals and the competition. It was how honestly what he spoke about after the spotlight faded. We discussed the long, boring, repetitive road between elite performance and really that identity crisis after achieving a lifelong goal, and why reinvention is so hard when the whole sense of self is really tied to that one thing. Apollo also shared how writing has really helped him reflect, heal, and really begin to build this next chapter of his life. If you're in the middle of your own pivot or working on this long project that requires deep focus, definitely this conversation, it'll land. If you do your research, you'll be impressed. Like truly like the modern Renaissance man in a bunch of interesting ways and places. 8-time medalist in the Winter Olympics, the most decorated Winter Olympian in the US history. He is a Hall of Famer from the Seattle, Washington Broad area, and he is certainly the most decorated Olympian of all time. Story is fascinating, though. I think he grew up in Seattle area. Most of us will never get the chance to go to Olympics, perform well, and win. What is that experience like, just for the uninformed who've never been able to go through it for you? How is that experience like of being able to do something like that, not only once, but multiple times? And maybe how would you describe the experience to someone?
The experience of the actual Olympics is incredible. And it's held once every 4 years for approximately 2 to 2.5 weeks. And you kind of have the world coming together from all these different countries to compete in what we would consider to be the pinnacle of all competition and performance. But the actual road to getting there is much more boring and mundane and repetitive than you probably even could explain. It's not a typical 4-year journey. It's not like just one decides to go to the Olympics and then in 4 years, he or she wants to go and make medals or create that experience. And depending on how young you are in the sport, you could be potentially training for 4 to 8, even 12 years plus for that one moment. So it is literally working on the same things every single day, trying to find the marginal levels of improvement. And in a sport like short track speed skating, we have always kind of figured out how to somehow surrender to the outcome because there's so many variables of change that we cannot control. And that part of that surrendering process is really coming to terms with the fact that the sport of short track speed skating is just so volatile that you must focus on the process much more than the prize. Although you use that prize as really the target. We hear a lot of people talk about this, and that's how I learned immense insight and life lessons is really through the sports. Question of what is that experience like? The road there is long and it's hard and it's boring and I loved it. But being at the games is really when you rip open the curtain
Yeah.
and you show the best version of yourself on that particular 2-week span.
Yeah, it's funny when you launched the book, did you find any similarities of those experiences having done it now multiple times?
I think the book was really interesting because it allowed me to relive those moments in a way that I could articulate what was happening in my head. So looking through all of the journals and all of the notes, and when you are in the present moment and you're competing, you may or may not really, you may not be thinking like, oh, I'm going to talk about this at a later date. This
Right.
is something that I need to remember and catalog in my brain. And your brain is creating those memories and categorizing them on their own. And then when you've got another person asking like you, say, tell me what the experience was like. What was that
Right.
memory like? And you're like, well, let me actually try to remember that race was only 40 seconds long, but I
Right.
trained for 14 years to get to that moment. The book was interesting because it was a time in which I wanted to write one of the first books I ever wrote was, and I heard you talk about Zero Regrets, which is
Yeah.
actually right there
Yeah.
behind me. And so that book was special because I had just come off the Olympic experience. And so my brain and body were really fresh with memories,
Mhm.
feeling, and emotion. And we were able to put that directly on to the pages. And I worked with a writer on that process, really help accelerate that in a lot of way. But I will tell you, if back then, 11 years ago, if I had the skill set of a writer, I 100% would have written it myself. I think that there's something that I'm doing. That's what I'm going through right now as
Yeah.
I'm writing my next book. It is a long, arduous process and really challenging. Just when
Yep.
I think that I'm like 80% done, I
Yeah.
realize that I'm actually only cutting out 80% of what I had
Yeah.
already written.
How did that sort of come to be the sort of way you led the story?
I think that the idea was that I wanted to just shine a light, even if it was on the surface level of what it was like growing up with this figure of father that was my coach and my teammate and my
Mhm.
mentor and my friend, and
The driver at
someone who
times?
didn't have, yeah, like someone who didn't have the technical expertise or business experience, but had these like deeply rooted fundamental and philosophical beliefs that he wanted to imprint on his son. And I did not know what my dad was doing, as
Mhm.
none of us do when we're
Mhm.
kids. Think that this is someone who we either look up to or we're scared of or whatever. And my dad was all of those things. And so it was really important because I think many people have always asked, where do you get that work ethic from? Where
Mhm.
does this drive and consistency to just pursue this life of performance that you did? Like, where is that? And I said, look, I'd love to take credit. It's nothing to do with
Yeah.
me.
Yep.
It's all to do with kind of the experiences that I had with my father growing up in a single parent household. And I felt that was really important, not only to create a connection with the potential reader and person who's going through the experience, and also show that when I take the helmet off and the racing suit off, you see me as I'm just another human being. And so
Yeah.
I've got these same internal ups and downs between my ears that everyone else has.
Yeah.
And I think it is those early day formations that help us navigate through that,
Yeah.
which is actually the new book after failing multiple times after I decided to retire from the Olympic space. And so
Mm.
all of us have our self perceived and I think understood identities associated with what we do and
Mm.
who we are. And those are
Mhm.
somehow intrinsically tied. And so, as someone who didn't care about anything outside of the Olympic realm for
Yeah.
15 years, I didn't know anything about what I was good at, what I was interested in, what I wanted to do next, and what my life purpose and or true north was.
Mm.
And it took a lot of I think, discovery, realization, a lot of self work in order for me to truly explore to see. And so, when people ask me, how did you pivot? I said,
Yeah.
I did the first thing that I was really good at, which I moved as fast as I could.
Yeah.
I made a ton of mistakes, but because I was moving so fast, I don't even know if I had the time to even recognize them as mistakes at the
Yeah.
time. So I used the idea behind speed and velocity
Hmm.
to enact real change.
Hmm.
And so I didn't know it at the time, but now as I reflect back upon those early formative years from 2010 is when I retired until 2014, I was deeply afraid of getting stuck in this mental prison
Interesting.
that I was tied to that identity. And I've now come to terms with every time I jump on one of these or I give yesterday I was doing a virtual live experience in Orange County in California. And I just realized that every time I speak, it's always, this is Apolo Ohno, the speed skater and Dancing with the Stars winner. And like, those are the three tenets,
Yeah.
typically entrepreneur, business owner, whatever. Those are the three tenets in which people explain who I am. On a deeper level, I'm obviously, and we are all much more than what is on our
Right.
business card or our
Right.
LinkedIn profile. That's just what we do at the present moment, but that's not
Yeah.
who we actually are.
Huh.
So that was really hard for me to understand because I had always thought, well, this is who I am. And I want to be something much more than an Olympic athlete. And so, how do I win on the opposite side of this kind of decisive and definitive points of how I could pivot to a new direction? And then also realizing and identifying that I am, and I use this analogy a lot, like my idea of who I am is just the top layer surface of the diamond. For all diamonds in some perspective, diamonds have multifaceted edges, areas.
Yeah.
And when we're looking at from the top down, very close to the diamond, we only see one
Yeah,
facet.
one view.
So, yeah, so we have to zoom out, right? Only way we can zoom out is to realize, oh my God, I've got all these different other areas of interests and curiosities and personalities that are going to grow, but it's up to me to polish them and shine them in a way that shows that these are other areas that I actually have skill sets under. And some of them we haven't developed yet. Like every 7 years or so, they say that we're reinventing internally and physiologically. So that's what I'm focused on today is understand what my core strengths are and what I
Right.
love to do naturally. I definitely understand what my weaknesses are and how I could kind of
Yep.
either lean on others for professional advice, improvement, and direction.
Yeah.
And then, so how do I create this more wholesome pie to accelerate that path towards the goal that I'm actually trying to attain?
Yeah.
And that has been this kind of ongoing process. And so
Yeah.
I feel like I've figured it out.
Yeah.
And I want to share that with people who are also potentially looking at pivoting. And
Yeah.
I think, look, at the end of the day, everyone is going to have to pivot in their life.